Allow me to pose you a hypothetical. When you get on a crowded bus, do you wait your turn, or do you elbow your way on so you can be the first one to sit down? If you answered the second, congratulations, you are not an anarchist. You are also probably a little bit of a jackass. Second to that, if you do get on, after waiting your turn, and see that there are only blue seats left, the ones generally reserved for people who need mobility help, do you take a quick look around to make sure no one else needs them before you sit down? Congratulations, if you answered yes to this question, you are not only an anarchist, but you are also a communist. Without the threat of state intervention, you and several strangers decided to organize fairly under the following principle. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Now, I know what you're thinking. Getting on the bus is pretty inconsequential, and even then some people sneak on the back door to avoid waiting in line. Or avoid something else. We'll get back to that. The same principles we use to govern bus boarding are not the principles we should use to organize our society, you might say. When the stakes are higher, people will act differently. To which I respond, what actually makes the stakes higher in general society versus getting on a bus? An anarchist argues that antisocial behavior, like sneaking on the back door of a bus, is caused directly by the systems of power and control already in place. Let's think about it for a second. What exists at the front of the bus? Yes, the line that you and your comrades have all democratically decided to form together, but also the mechanism by which you pay to ride and the person who enforces that mechanism. Well, the driver isn't very likely to get out of his seat for someone cutting in line or someone taking up a blue seat when they shouldn't. Well, if you've ever been on a bus, you know how they react when someone doesn't pay. To quote directly from David Graeber, almost all the antisocial behavior which makes us think it's necessary to have armies, police, prisons, and governments to control our lives is actually caused by the systemic inequalities and injustice those armies, police, prisons, and governments make possible. To break the metaphor for just a moment. Now let's back up for just a moment. Chances are you've heard a lot of things about anarchists lately in the media, likely used in the same sentence as either arson or Black Lives Matter, or both, depending on who CNN or Fox are trying to make look bad on a given day. But an anarchist, an actual anarchist, believes in two fundamental principles. The first being that human beings are, under ordinary circumstances, about as reasonable and decent as they are allowed to be, and can organize themselves in their communities without needing to be told how. The second, and stop me if you've heard this one before, is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In short, the principles of common decency are, especially in a modern context where there is plenty to go around, a fine way to organize society. There's even a version of anarchism, as proposed by Max Stirner, that posits that even if people are fundamentally selfish, as long as everyone understands that it's in their best interest to get along with the rest of society, they pose no more danger to the ideals of anarchism than, the one based on people being good people. Though it should be noted many anarchists don't like Max Stirner for unrelated reasons. And related reasons. There's a lot of reasons not to like Max Stirner. Let's be honest with each other here. Unless you are part of a very select group. Hey, editing Maddie here. I realized that when I said a very select group, it sounded like I was implying... I mean, you know what it sounded like I was implying. And so I thought I would make it very clear. The very select group is like billionaires and not Jewish people. I don't like that that's still a conversation that we have to have, but it is. Let's be honest with each other here. Unless you are part of a very select group, the people in power, even the politicians you elect, no longer really represent your interests, do they? I mean, they might pretend to, but at the end of the day, they are ultimately in it for themselves. But why? I mean, think about it. Which politician reaps the most reward? One who sticks up for the little guy, the guy who probably will never be able to return the favor, or the one who sticks up for the big guy who's so good at returning the favor it's an entire industry for him? What an anarchist believes is that our current systems of power reward people for being selfish, and those rewards in turn make it easier to be selfish. Sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Power moves up as individuals or families or corporations accrue power, leaving the average working class or middle class person with almost no control over their own life. Sure, you can kind of choose where to work in some cases, but not when, not for what compensation, not for how long. Even under circumstances where you may not be able to work as hard as everyone else because of a disability or because you have family at home. It doesn't have to be that way, though. Stateless societies have existed throughout history. Pre-colonial America, for example, that is to say indigenous society, is largely thought to be an example of anarchism. That isn't to say they didn't have their own conflicts, but those conflicts were comparatively minuscule compared to the conflicts that capitalism gets us into. And to put a point on it, the conflict that capitalism got them into, where we're still feeling the effects of that one. That said, it's been almost 500 years since the last time a true indigenous society held power in the West. And since then, we have invented at least a few things. There's steam engines. We have bread boxes now. The iPod Touch. That's one we really fucking kicked ass with. The iPod Touch, that one rules. I fucking love the iPod Touch. So, how does anarchy work in a post-iPod Touch society? Well, actually, the theory is it makes anarchy a whole lot easier. One of the seminal works of anarchist literature, and in fact probably the first book you'll be recommended as an anarchist, is The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin. In the book, Kropotkin spends the 3 longest chapters describing how food, luxury goods, and agriculture would look. This is, of course, in 1908, when there were still people alive who remembered a time before the combine harvester existed. Even then, Kropotkin estimates that a hard-working person would only have to work 6 months out of the year, with weekends off, to provide for themselves and their family. The rest of the year, Kropotkin said, could be used in the pursuit of knowledge, in honing a skill in the subsequent production of luxury goods, or, if one was so inclined, just chillin', just having a good time and kicking back. 63 years later, at a time where the internet was a toy for smart college professors, Murray Bookchin posted a legendary tweet called, "What if we did anarchy in the future?" 63 years later, at a time where the internet was a toy for smart college professors, Murray Bookchin published Post-Scarcity Anarchism, in which he posits that, if our society was not organized around feeding wealth to the powers above us, almost no one would have to do any hard work at all. It's been 20 years since then. No, it hasn't. It's 2020. That book came out in 1971. It's been 49 years since then. Holy shit. Yeah, it's been 41 years. I mean, look around. We have the iPod Touch now. Murray Bookchin could never have dreamed of the fucking iPod Touch. Are you kidding me? It's important to remember, too, that while capitalism sold you the iPod Touch, it was made by people. Let's finish with this. Do you actually believe the things your parents told you when you were a kid? Things like, it doesn't matter who started it. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Clean up your own mess. Do unto others as they would do unto you. Don't be mean to people just because they're different. These are all fundamentally anarchist pieces of thought. Almost all of these stand in defiance of modern state capitalism. 2 wrongs, for example, knocks down the entire foundation of the criminal justice system. If people and corporations were really left to clean up their own mess, the state would not have recently poured $1.5 trillion into the New York Stock Exchange. What you're taught as children is, well, more or less correct. The greatest achievements in human history, including the iPod Touch, have been based around the principles we are taught as children. Cooperation, generosity, that kind of thing. There is a fundamental disconnect between the fair world we want, the one we want to tell our children about, and the one that we have constructed. But there doesn't have to be. I've been Maddie Girlmeat. If you are an anarchist, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. and thank you so much for watching.